In the name of God, hello and welcome. I'm Ali Reza Maladi and you're watching Iran English News coming to you live from the Iranian capital, Tehran. Iranian Health Minister Saeed Namaki says the number of fatalities from the novel coronavirus pandemic has dropped to double digits for the first time in 1 month. My colleague Omid Haydari has the scoop.
Speaking to the Iranian people on Instagram Live on Tuesday, Namaki hailed the country's proper fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, adding that 98 deaths from the disease were registered in the past 24 hours. He said, "We are implementing a smart distancing and have announced protocols for it. We want to say that we are currently at a more appropriate situation." Namaki, however, warned that the country will face new challenges if health protocols and the smart distancing are not observed properly. Meanwhile, Health Ministry spokesman Kianis Jampur said the new deaths brought the total number of fatalities to 4,683 since the outbreak of the coronavirus in Iran in late February. Jampur added 1,574 new infections have been recorded over the past 24 hours, taking the overall number of the confirmed cases to 74,877. He noted that 48,129 of hospitalized patients had recovered and been discharged, and that 3,691 people are in critical conditions. Iran's successful response to the virus comes despite the illegal U.S. sanctions which are hampering the country's efforts to rein in the virus. Iran has been employing strict precautionary measures since the virus surfaced in the country. It has heavily ramped up the required health services, including by increasing the number of hospital beds, and shut up the production of disinfectants and relevant sanitary items. The Health Ministry reported Monday that new cases of coronavirus infections and death from the viral outbreak had been declining across most of the country's 31 provinces. Meantime, President Hassan Rouhani said on Sunday that Iran has handled the novel coronavirus outbreak better than Europe and the United States, assuring that the country's stocks of basic commodities are replenished better than ever, unlike the scenario unfolding in the United States and many other Western states. Elsewhere, a senior Iranian military commander says that the army's ground forces are set to unveil 5 new healthcare-related achievements that will help with the diagnosis of COVID-19 and prevent the deadly coronavirus from spreading. Brigadier General Qamar Haydari, commander of the Iranian Army's ground forces, said 2 achievements in the field of diagnosis and 3 achievements in the field of disinfection will be unveiled during a ceremony on Wednesday. The Army, he said, is advancing a mega-project for sterilizing cities and open areas, which has already been put into use. The Iranian commander further enumerated a set of measures adopted by the armed forces to help eliminate the disease, including the launch of convalescent centers and mobile hospitals, as well as the production of masks and disinfectants. He said that the Iranian army has made available some 28 hospitals and 12,000 medical staff, as well as 9,900 hospital beds, to the country's health ministry. At least 1,920,918 COVID-19 infections have been confirmed worldwide, and 119,686 people have died so far, with the United States leading all nations in both the number of cases and the death toll, followed by major Western European countries. Latest data collected by the US-based Johns Hopkins University showed that the United States by far leads the 214 countries and territories affected by the viral pandemic, with 582,580 cases as of Monday, followed by Spain, Italy, France, Germany and Britain in that order. More than 71,000 new cases of infection with the new coronavirus and 5,319 more deaths from the disease were reported worldwide within the past 24 hours, as many countries discuss plans to loosen lockdown measures, despite concerns about the likelihood of fresh outbreaks.
Meanwhile, beaten down by the coronavirus outbreak, the world economy in 2020 will suffer its worst year since the Great Depression of the 1930s, and that's according to the International Monetary Fund's latest forecast. The IMF said on Tuesday that it expects the global economy to shrink 3% this year, far worse than its 0.1% dip in the Great Recession year of 2009, before rebounding in 2021 with 5.8% growth. It acknowledges, though, that the prospects for a rebound next year are clouded by uncertainty. The bleak assessment represents a breathtaking downgrade by the IMF. In its previous forecast in January, before COVID-19 emerged as a grave threat to public health and economic growth worldwide, the International Lending Organization had forecast moderate global growth of 3.3% this year. Last week, the IMF's managing director warned that the world was facing the worst economic fallout since the Great Depression. She said that emerging markets and low-income nations across Africa, Latin America, and much of Asia were at especially high risk. And on Monday, the IMF approved $500 million to cancel 6 months of debt payment for 25 impoverished countries. Now, Pope Francis has called for global solidarity in fighting the coronavirus pandemic and its economic fallout, urging the relaxation of international sanctions, debt relief for poor nations, and ceasefire in all conflicts.
In an Easter celebration like no other, following the coronavirus lockdown restrictions, Pope Francis delivered on Sunday what many Vaticanists have dubbed his most pressing and political message since his election in March 2013. During a strikingly empty Easter service at St. Peter's Basilica, due to the coronavirus outbreak, the pontiff addressed all world leaders who see political conflicts and wars as attractive ways to achieve goals. The head of the Holy See condemned arms manufacturing and said the COVID-19 crisis should prompt world leaders to finally end long-running conflicts such as that in Syria. He also called for debt reductions or forgiveness for the poorest nations and for international sanctions to be relaxed.
In considerazione delle circostanze,
It is more urgent than ever, especially in the present circumstances, to relax all international sanctions. These sanctions make it difficult for countries on which they've been imposed to provide adequate support to their citizens. This is not a time for indifference, because the whole world is suffering and needs to be united in facing the pandemic.
fronte.
In mid-March, citing the increasing loss of lives to the coronavirus pandemic and a lack of medical resources, Iranian cleric Ayatollah Sayyed Mustafa Moakhek Damad had urged the pontiff to do what he can to help get US sanctions against Iran lifted. In his letter to Pope Francis, the Ayatollah said Iran has seen a rapid spread of the COVID-19 outbreak, having the sanctions unilaterally imposed by the Trump administration multiplied the sufferings and afflictions of the oppressed Iranian Muslim people, forcing them to face countless problems that have had a profound and negative impact on their life, on their peace and spiritual tranquility, and moreover, have deprived them of the most basic human rights.
In addition to the Pope's appeal, a number of Catholic organizations have called on relaxing sanctions on Iran, Gaza and Syria because it's absolutely inconceivable that in this time of great suffering, people cannot access the medical assistance they need. In his Easter Mass, Pope Francis implored world leaders not to forget the vulnerable in a plea for global solidarity during the coronavirus pandemic.
Iran has reported tens of thousands of coronavirus cases and thousands of deaths since the virus crisis began over a month ago. It is one of the hardest hit nations after China, the US, Italy and Spain. After receiving a letter from the Iranian cleric Ayatollah Moakhek Damad, the Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Parolin reached out to the US ambassador to the United Nations Kelly Craft at the end of March, conveying Iran's fears about the sanctions and asking Washington to address the difficulty. Nothing has been done by the Trump administration since. Max Civilli, Press TV, Rome.
Moving on, Yemen's Ansarullah movement says the invading Saudi Arabian-led coalition has even ramped up its acts of aggression against the impoverished country after claiming it had initiated a voluntary ceasefire. The popular Yemeni defense group's spokesman Mohammad Abdul Salam called the ceasefire claim false and misleading. He denounced any claim on the part of the coalition alleging that it had begun observing self-restraint and accusing the Ansarullah movement of violating the ceasefire as ridiculous. The coalition has been launching indiscriminate attacks against Yemen since March 2015 to put the country's former Saudi-allied official back in the saddle. The war has killed tens of thousands of Yemenis and rendered at least 80% of its 28 million-strong population dependent on aid for survival. Last week, the invaders claimed they were halting military operations in support of the United Nations peace efforts and to avoid further spread of the new coronavirus in Yemen. The Yemeni army, however, reported days afterwards that it had been forced to repel several Saudi-led assaults on several fronts in just one day. And finally, in Latin America, Venezuela has extended coronavirus quarantine for another one more month.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro announced a 30-day-long extension of the ongoing quarantine nationwide to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Maduro said his decision is based on the Constitution, which grants him authority to order the citizens to stay home to protect them from getting infected with the deadly virus. The announcement indicates that the lockdown will run through May 13th, but it can be renewed if necessary. The Venezuelan leader initially declared a state of alarm on March 13th, but decided to extend it after 1 month in a bid to minimize risks of wider contagion. Socialist officials justify Maduro's move.
Our government is doing what the U.S. has never done, maximizing social distancing to prevent a real pandemic.
Nonetheless, the opposition says the economic impact of the measure is not being taken care of.
People need to take to the street and work every day. The government is not giving them money for staying home.
However, pro-government lawmakers say there are official programs to endure the quarantine.
There are subsidized food programs provided by the government so people can bear the quarantine.
But some experts say more government policies are needed to mitigate the economic situation.
Not everybody gets a food ration from the government, and many people are losing their jobs. They truly need more help.
Under quarantine, only people who provide transportation, health services, and deliveries of food and medicine are allowed to continue working. But as gasoline sales are restricted in the country, even doctors and food transporters report having problems in mobilizing. The Venezuelan government has ordered 30 more days of quarantine throughout the country to tackle the coronavirus outbreak, but it is now forced to cope with economic effects of it. As millions of workers are mandatorily staying home, so far it is uncertain how they will make ends meet. Jesus Silva, Press TV, Caracas.
Thank you for staying with us. Good night.